Our speaker, Lucy Heskins. Lucy runs Oh Blimey, partnering with B2B product and service founders to validate their offerings, build marketing foundations, and grow their customer base. With experience in startups and scale-ups, she'll share insights on achieving product market fit. Her work has been featured in Techcrunch, Sifted, Product Tank, and Business of Software, sorry. So thank you, Lucy.
Thank you very much. Oh, that made me sound like I know what I'm doing. All right. So, yeah, thank you so much for that. And thank you, everybody, for joining me for today's session, where I'm going to be talking about product market fit. So for some of you, this topic might be completely new. For others, it might be a bit of a refresher. And for some, it might help you if you've noticed that maybe growth has stalled within your business and you want to think about what to focus on next. So either way, I hope there's going to be a takeaway for each and every one of you. The session itself is going to be around 35 minutes, and I'm going to be digging into these four main areas. So first of all, what is product market fit? So I'm going to start off with a lovely bit of theory this evening to keep you on your toes. Following this, I'll share a couple of definitions that have worked for me, and I'll also talk about where it sits within the overall growth process. Now, following this, I'm going to be talking about how to achieve it. So only 58% of businesses actually go on to reach this stage, and that's because it is really blooming hard. So I'm going to show you, based on my experience of working in two businesses that reached it, what it looked like and what it felt like. Following this, we're going to look at a few market validation strategies. Now, I'm very aware a lot of jargon just came out of my mouth, but this is the part that is largely based on the work of Brian Balfour, and he devised a few checkpoints that you can use to implement within your business to understand kind of how far off you might be, okay? These are the steps that I've used in-house when I was occupying a marketing/product role. So I can pretty much tell you what worked and also where I broke them as well. And then lastly, I'm going to share with you a couple of lessons I've picked up along the way, which I just really wish I'd known from the beginning. If I'm honest, I think it probably would have saved a lot of time, tears, and money, but probably a lot more tears, if anything. So I was introduced, thank you very much. Just a little bit more background on me. It's not a sales slide, I promise, but it's just to show you where this thinking has come from. So I'm Lucy, I run Oh Blimey, and I work with tech and software organizations, helping them to validate and go to market. So over the years, I've worked in Cardiff and Exeter, and I've been involved in around 20 products. So that's from the capacity of working in-house, working for a software development agency, and as a consultant. So products have ranged from a CRM for a social care organization, recruitment tech, ed tech, and SaaS. But the real learning, in my opinion, comes from doing it yourself and working in-house. So pre-Oh Blimey, I was employee number one. There were two of us, working for a startup in Cardiff called Career Cake. So the actual business itself was an online learning platform run by a little all-female team. And within a few years, after some investment from the founders of GoCompare, we went from 0 customers to working with the likes of LinkedIn, Nationwide, and TechNation. That company was acquired just after COVID, and that experience is probably what kind of forms a lot of the talk this evening. So when I say I've got the scars and the stripes, I do promise you that's where it's come from. So if I jump straight in, then what is product market fit? Let's be honest, this possibly could be one of the most fluffiest topics, right? Everyone's got an opinion on it. Every marketing bro has a take on it, and apparently if you reach it, you're successful. I don't know if you've ever Googled it, but there is so much out there. And if you are new to this, or you just want a bit of focus, it can be a little bit daunting. So what I'm going to do is try and share with you a couple of definitions that worked for me. So I'm going to give you a very short history lesson. I'm going to take you back to the mid-90s. I want you to think Spice Girls, the Labour Party in a world with no smartphones. And a guy called Andy Ratcliffe comes on the scene and he comes up with this magical term. And he describes product market fit as being a unique product offering that people desperately want. And he suggests the term as a way for new businesses to think about what you're offering, who you're offering it to, and how you're going to take that product to market. So today, we know this as the foundations of go-to-market, but at the time, it's pretty important because all of a sudden, these new businesses, these founders, have been given a language to understand what they need to do and why. A couple of years ago, I won't name any names, I was working for one particular company and we brought on this new investor and he was obsessed with the term product market fit. And it got to the point where he kept on asking me when I thought that we would reach it. So really, really helpful. But I realized I was a bit uncomfortable with the question because I didn't actually have a definition that made sense to me. So I did some research and this is the one that kind of landed the best, okay? So reaching product market fit is all about confirming with absolute certainty that your offering works for your customer at every level. And when I say every level, what I mean really is your product, your market, your channels, your brand, and your customer. They're all linked, okay? They need to be working together to reach this stage. The problem with this is in my opinion, there's way too much focus on hitting a revenue number or this magical milestone of customers. And that takes away the actual point of what this is. It's actually a process. There's no hard stop. It's something that continues to go on and on. Now, for those of you who are listening in and are aware of the kind of topic, you might be familiar with this guy here, Mark Andreessen, another original creator of the term. They seem to be fighting over who developed it. But he said another way to describe it is when you're overwhelmed with usage to the point where you can't make major changes to your product because you're swamped just keeping it up and running. So that's the definition that people are most kind of familiar with. And then we've got another guy, Sean Ellis, and he created a way to measure and see if you have product market fit. And he suggests that if at least 40% of customers say they would be very disappointed if they no longer have access to a product or service, you, my friend, have product market fit. Okay, I've got a couple of issues with this articulation, of which we'll come to later, but generally this is what we're talking about. So if we zoom out for a minute, I think it's probably best to have a look at where this body of work happens within the overall growth process. So it's widely accepted. These are the 3 stages a business will go through when validating, going to market, and then scaling. So first of all, we've got phase 1, which is known as traction. And for the marketers in the room, we call this sometimes problem market fit. So the way that you would kind of describe this is it's the point where you are identifying and evidencing a problem and then designing some form of value proposition that addresses your customers' needs, jobs, pains, and gains. Following this is something called transition, which is product market fit. So what we're talking about today. And it's at this point we are evidencing the value prop that you've made creates value for customers. And you know that you're at this point because you've got paying customers, you're testing, and you're ramping up activity. So when people talk about the chaos, it's usually where this bit is, where the arrow is. And then following that, we've got the growth stage, also known as platform market fit. And this is where a business is able to evidence that they've got a collection or a suite of products or services that fit within the market. So this is the context that we're talking about. So far, so good, I'm assuming. I've got no negative emojis, so I'm going to carry on. I am going to put a little spanner in the works, though, because some people, myself included, we've got a bit of an issue with the term product market fit. I think it should be market product fit. And that's because to lead with a product suggests that the product is the most important part of this, the sole focus. But we actually know it's the market that's the important part. It's the market that dictates the product. It's the market that dictates what you build, how you sell it, how you build that business model around it. The rest of this session, I will call it product market fit, but I just wanted to kind of plant that seed as a validation marketer. Okay, I told you that the theory was going to be quick. So now we're going to look at what that process of achieving product market fit looks like. And I'm very aware that I'm making it sound really simple. We've got to remember that it's tough. 42% of businesses don't get to this stage. And of those businesses that do reach it, doesn't mean that the work is done. Rather, you're showing a sign of scalability. Okay. So if we break it down, we work in products and tech businesses. These are largely the three components that need to be working together to achieve this magical stage, okay? So we need to be able to prove that we're delivering value, and we do this by demonstrating good retention rates, particularly within our ideal client profile. We need to prove that we are making money. We need to show that we've got paying customers, and more importantly, we've sorted our pricing structure. It may have taken hundreds of iterations, and it may have taken 50 arguments with somebody in sales, but let's assume the pricing is sorted. And then lastly, we need to prove to users, we need to prove that users see value in the product and get why they need it. So that means when someone comes to the product and signs up, they know exactly what they need to do to achieve this desired outcome. And if you've got a product background, you'll know this is something called the aha moment. How long does it take to achieve product market fit? This question comes up quite a lot. I am a marketer at heart, so of course I'm going to say to you, it depends. It depends on the market, the problems you're solving, external factors, you name it. Now, there's a very clever chap. I don't see the point in reinventing the wheel, so I've taken the stats from his report. There's a guy called Lenny Rachitsky, and he's known for his product podcast. And he developed a report, it's all on his website, and he interviewed a number of businesses to find out how long it took them, to see if he could get like an average number. So high-level stats, it took Netflix 18 months, it took Airbnb 2 years, it took Amplitude 4 years, and it took Figma 5 years to reach product market fit. The report itself is really interesting because it also highlights other things like Miro. Miro didn't get their first paying customer until year 2. And Airtable, they didn't get their first customer until they were about 4 years old. Did I just see a question come up, or shall I?
Oh, let's have a look.
I think that was Matthew, wasn't it? Did you want to ask a question, Matthew?
No, apologies. Not yet.
Not yet. All right, we'll
yet.
save that for later. Now, closer to home, the recruitment tech business that I worked for back in Exeter, and that took about 2.5 years. So I think the point I'm trying to make here is that when you hear businesses being described as an overnight success, it takes a little bit longer, okay? This is how long things can take, especially when I'm sure that you've got a lot of investment backing behind you as well. So those are the time frames. This all sounds lovely, right? But what does it actually look like to a human being, okay? So a little bit like this. Apologies, I'm not a designer, so please don't focus too much on the squiggles. Product market fit, the process is, in my opinion, a series of setbacks, fixations on things we're not meant to be fixating on, and putting out a lot of fires. So this diagram here may or may not be a visual representation of what it was like to work in one of those businesses that reached product market fit. And I kind of describe it to people in 3 acts. So Act 1. You come in and you join the founder, and they've got this wonderful idea. People start to buy in, but people aren't signing up as quickly as they'd want them to do. So rather than digging in and trying to work out what's going on there. The founder, and I'm being particularly mean on the founder here, but the founder fixates on this marketing tactic to get those premature sales in, so they chuck it on Product Hunt or whatever. Usage rates go up, hey, and then very quickly you realize that your retention is poor because you didn't get the right customers coming in. Act 2 is when you suit up and you bring in marketing or kind of the strategic lead. They come in and they start ranting about developing an ICP, an ideal client profile. It's a long and it's a hard slog, mainly because you are spending all of your time trying to keep the founder on the straight and narrow. But something clicks, sales start to come in, and you notice things like the team of 6 that you joined has all of a sudden gone to 30, then it goes to 50. As a head of sales, a VP of sales, a sales of sales, the salesperson has a VA, like it's just like this weird mutant, I don't know. But there are a couple of other setbacks that come in as you bring in more people, because we are complex little beasts. And sales, I'm picking on them now. Sales develop this godlike complex. They tell us that they are the voice of the customer, and they start dictating the features that need to be made. So a few fires here. And then finally, you've got Act 3. So whilst this is all happening, you're just there trying to sort out retention. You're trying to get your head around cost per acquisition. You're just trying to get that first enterprise customer to sign off. And all of that eventually does. It's likely that you might lose people along the way. You might get different investors that change the culture. But mainly you just spend the next like 12 months just thinking, what the hell have I done? What the hell have I done? So largely that's what we're talking about here. So let's say you want to achieve it. What signals are we looking out for? Okay, so the first one is customers are naturally gravitating towards your product. So what I mean by that is the demand for what you offer is great. People are referring others, word of mouth is through the roof, but crucially, it's not a tough sale. You don't have to over-explain what you do. People just get it. The second signal is the level of intensity around that pull for your offering, okay? And it's largely dependent on 2 factors. We've got the market and also the type of problem that you're solving. So if you are entering a niche or a small market, of course, you're likely to kind of reach that saturation point a lot more quickly than if you, let's say, enter a direct-to-consumer model. Okay, if you are entering a broader market, it's going to take a little bit longer. It's also going to feel differently as well based on the problem that you're solving. So that will ultimately be determined on whether your offering is a painkiller or a vitamin. And then lastly, there's so many learning opportunities. It's not linear. We've seen it's a bit of an ugly squiggle. You go backwards, you go even more backwards. You're just kind of always kind of overthinking. And you've just got to embrace it, right? And I used to have this motto, say growth mindset whilst gritting your teeth. But on reflection, you are learning stuff and you're having to think on your feet as well. So this slide here is borrowed from an author called Maya Voig. I believe that's how it's pronounced her name. And so she suggests the signals. So I've listed out a few of the positive signals that I've experienced. We've obviously got some examples here of signals that suggest you haven't reached product market fit. So a couple of things to just keep your eye out on. Difficulty in attracting new customers, longer conversion times because people just don't get your value proposition. And there are other tells. So for example, if sales start offering discounts, that could be a sign that maybe product market fit hasn't been reached. Yes. Okay, so we're now going to get on to the third part. So that's exploring these market validation strategies. Again, apologies for the jargon that is coming out of my mouth, but the steps that you can implement when you are working in a business. I think just to put it in context here, there isn't somebody standing on the side with a sign telling your business that you're moving from traction to transition, okay? You might have advisors, you might be part of an accelerator, but chances are you're doing all this work yourself, okay? You're closest to this. And one of the most unhelpful things that we were told when I was working for a particular startup was to focus on the major players. And there is generally nothing worse than listening to a consultant who cites the likes of Amazon or Apple as examples to follow, especially when you're in that early stage, because you're working to different metrics. Chances are you don't have the same business model. And what happens is you start to kind of compare yourself. And that's where some of that negativity can come from. It's like comparing apples and sledgehammers. It's really, really different. Now, a couple of things that you can put in yourself then are these checkpoints. So the checkpoints were created by Brian Balfour and Sean Ellis. And there are 4 in total. I'm going to be discussing 3. Main reason being I've never used the last one, so I can't tell you how I broke it. So first up is the leading indicator survey. Okay, so you may recall that we visited this earlier, and it's that question that asks customers, how would you feel if you could no longer use the product or service? Okay, anyone that remembers when I started talking about this will remember that it's the 40%. That's the figure that we're looking out for, okay? So applying this to a business that I worked in there. So that's CreaCake there. So after about 12 months of us launching our platform, we started growing month on month. We had investors, we had our first enterprise client sign up and use us. But we realized now it was actually, we've got to start focusing, we've got to start doubling down on things. So I come across this question and I think, do you know what, I'm going to build this survey and I'm going to embed it into our monthly subscription communications. So I create the survey, I send it to this mailing list, and I sit back waiting for the results. And a week later, we have a look and they've come in. 67% of people tell us that they would be gutted, distraught even, if we stopped offering our product. So I'm happy. I'm like, oh, we've got product market fit. I run into the CEO and she's like, oh my goodness, that's brilliant. We start like patting each other on the back. We're thinking about what we're going to do with all this money coming in. And whilst we're celebrating, and you know who didn't look happy? It was Abby in accounts. So whilst we're celebrating, she turns around to us and she was like, well, that's all great, but we're barely breaking even. We called her the fun sponge, by the way, but she is lovely. So the mistake that we had with this, or the mistake I made with this, was asking the wrong people. What we were doing was we were asking the fans and not the people that were actually paying the bills or paying for the subscription. So there is a book called The Mom Test that tells us not to ask biased questions, but in this instance, we were asking biased supporters. So I was asking people who were day one in the free trial, YouTube subscribers, people that were on our newsletter. I wasn't actually asking anybody who was involved in the money part. And I'm hugely aware a couple of years later, that sounds really daft. But if you have your head down and you've just got days, if not weeks of setbacks, you do kind of make silly mistakes, and that's absolutely what we did. Now, if you are looking to put this in your business, a couple of things that I would point out, segment your user base. Now, this is important, especially if you've got a B2B and a B2B2C element as well. Look at your data set, look at your paying users and break them into different cohorts. So break them up into whether they are users, managers, or check payers, but also think about where they are in kind of the billing cycle as well. The one caveat I would say about this is, and I'm probably going to sound like I'm going backwards, is don't pay too much attention to this number. The reason being is it's an example of a leading indicator, which is also known as a what if question. So it's not actually based on any action taken. It's an opinion. So the good part about implementing this is it means that you're committed to putting this stuff in and starting to collect that data. So the second checkpoint is, these just roll off the tongue, don't they? The leading indicator engagement data. Okay, so unlike what I've just covered, this one looks at the actions of someone who has done something. So what I'm talking about here is the recording of events. So our platform was a SaaS platform with a subscription model, and we were new to this, right? So we thought all we need to do is look at the number of free trials, people that log in on day 3, and maybe someone that's watched the first 10 seconds of a course, because we'd heard that Netflix does that. Okay, so we're collecting this information, and very quickly we realise we don't really know what to do with this information. And because we're not acting on it, revenue still isn't growing. So it's at this point, I went on a course and was chatting to someone, and they pretty much said you need to record the events or the actions that are related to the core purpose of the product. So at the time, the core purpose of Career Cake was to get people feeling more confident about going for promotions at work. And funnily enough, checking to see if they'd logged back in on day 3 was not going to show us. At the same time, we come across something called the jobs to be done theory. If you are not aware of it, it's a product innovation framework, and it helps us to get to the bottom of why people hire and fire products to make progress in life. Okay. And and through learning about this, we were able to actually learn by talking to our users what the desired outcome was by subscribing to our particular platform. This process showed that we had a lot of gaps in our data, so we implemented a couple of things that kind of positively impacted our results. So we would interview users who had recently just become a paying customer, and the emphasis there is recent. If you speak to people who are recent buyers, they are more easily able to recall the steps that they went through. We then changed our recording and created workflows that we believed reflected someone was really connecting with the core purpose of what we were trying to do. And we also put in a couple of extra questions from the onboarding perspective as well. So the recording of events then changed for us. We were looking at users who were coming in and watching 3 courses in full, creating a playlist, and then sending it to 3 of their friends or 3 of their team members. Okay, and what we noticed was that combination of activities correlated with an increase in renewals as well. So again, this wasn't something that happened over the course of a couple of weeks. It was a couple of months, because we had to play around with what those workflows looked like. But it was just interesting. And then the last part then, so retention data. Okay, so we know that if you are focusing on hitting product market fit, your kind of main focus needs to be around retention, okay? But it's not just about recording churn and thinking that your work is done. So at one point, our retention rates were shocking, absolutely shocking. So we had I think it was a 12% conversion rate on our free trial to paid subscriptions, which seemed a bit mad for what we were offering and the context that we were working in. So again, just to put it in context, we offered a 3-day trial, requiring card details up front. We were reporting on retention as a whole. And when we saw our retention rate getting worse, we thought, let's just advertise more. Let's just get more leads in. It's fine. That's what everybody does. Turns out what we should have been looking out for was a retention curve that flattens over time, okay? And we also learned that rather than looking at our retention rate as a whole, we needed to break it down by cohort. So at the time, we had 5 different customer segments, and we found it was 2 of them that were drastically pulling down our retention rates, okay? So we're able to kind of dig into that and understand the work that we needed to do to raise the retention of those 2 segments. We used Hotjar, Chargebee, and Full Story. I made very good friends with our development team because at that point there wasn't a button that I could just export all of this into a pretty graph, because I'm a marketer. And we really stayed committed to running those jobs to be done interviews as well. And what we found was we saw the increase, the retention rate increase to 45% for those 2 cohorts. So we saw some improvements from this work as well. But I think perhaps the biggest learning that I certainly experienced from this is churn isn't always a bad thing. People churn for different reasons, right? People churn because, especially if you work within B2B, people change jobs. People come into your products and they do what they need to, and then they go away. So it's not, churn doesn't just mean people aren't getting on with your platform. Okay,
I agree with you, Lucy, on that one. I think there is a, it's got a bad rap, isn't it? But actually, sometimes there is a beginning, middle, and end to their journey, and it might not be that it is destined to be always with them.
Yeah, I think when you hear about poor retention rate, you just think of the negative. You don't think about people that actually went on and were in a good place. It was a good thing. Thank you for sharing that. Another thing that we learned, there were users in our platform that we had no idea about. So at this point, I think we had about 6,000 users on the platform. And as part of the interviews that we were running, I spoke to this nice chap called Charlie, and he told me that he had 12 accounts with us. And it's because he was creating an account just to rinse the free content. So there were little things like that that were skewing our figures as well. And we needed to work out kind of how to sort it out. And we became friends with Charlie in the end. So we like Charlie, and I'm aware that this is being recorded. So thank you, Charlie. Right. Okay, I'm on the kind of last section, if you're still all okay with me kind of pressing forward. And these are the kind of the three lessons that I wish I'd learned really kind of early on. Again, some of these might be completely obvious, and you might be there going, oh my goodness, Lucy, why did you not even know that? But in my capacity now working with clients, some of them still come up as well. So I thought it was worth sharing them. So the first one is very much based around this quote from Peter Drucker. And he said, people rarely buy what your company thinks it's selling. Okay, so as startups, as founders, as people working in businesses, we're obsessed with our products. We think that customers live and breathe our brands, but it turns out that is not the case. And when we think like this, right, what ends up happening is the product, the marketing, the sales that we create is from our perspective, the supply perspective, and not theirs, which is the demand. And this is important, right, because how a customer derives value from your product changes over time. People change jobs, people move houses. We've discussed all these kind of things. So I think now in hindsight, what would I do differently, or what would I say to people that are kind of going through this process? Talk to your customers and talk to them often. I hate it when you get given really generic marketing advice like that, but talk to them often and talk to them about what they were struggling with and what they were hoping to achieve with your product, and what were those questions that were going through their mind when they were making a purchase decision. Collect both qualitative and quantitative data. You need both. You need both to understand the context in which people make decisions. And I've mentioned it before, speak to the people that pay the bills. I mean, that one's slightly obvious, but worth repeating. The second lesson is market to everyone and you will sell to no one. So anybody with a marketing background will know that I'm preaching to the converted. But as business owners, we have a tendency to overestimate or over-exaggerate who our target customers are. A couple of reasons. Some do it to persuade investors of the size of the potential opportunity. Others do it because they don't realize that they're treating customers in this kind of like homogenous way. But the thing is, we're all human. We don't act and buy in the same way, and there's nuance between different segments. And if you pay attention to the nuance, this is where you're going to speed up the sales process. So in the early days of Career Cake, we thought that we were selling to HR directors in businesses with 250 staff. Now, eventually that was who we sold to. but it wasn't the ICP, it wasn't the ideal client profile that we needed to focus on to get those first sales and work out all the kinks of the process, okay? So what I think if I was to go through this process again, I would talk to people who have the biggest pain and are ready to throw money at a solution like ours in the state that it's in. It does not need to be perfect. You've just got to find people that are happy and can do what they need to do with your product in the state that it's in. And when you land a few of these, they act as stepping stones. So you're able to kind of start going into other industries or work with larger organizations. And it's those stepping stone businesses that will help you kind of land the larger client. So for us, we had our site set on Nationwide. Now, 3 years into the process, we started working with Nationwide, but we needed to work out the kinks and the process and the language of the finance sector first to be able to seem a little bit more kind of credible. And then the last kind of preachy lesson I'm going to share with you is this, okay? So it's not what your product does, it's what it helps your customer to become. So at the beginning of this talk, I said to you, reaching product market fit is all about confirming with absolute certainty that your offering works for your customer at every level. And those organizations that focus on what a customer can go on to achieve are most likely to kind of be the really successful ones. They know where their product slots in within the ecosystem and tech stack. They understand how it alleviates pain, but ultimately they understand how it helps their customer to do a better job. So a couple of examples. What if I told you Salesforce does not sell CRMs? Salesforce sell a solution to marketing directors to fast track their career to be CMOs, for example. What they're doing is they are helping you through their product become best friends with the head of sales, understand the pipeline better, and ultimately help you to close more leads. Headspace, yes, they're selling a well-being app, but what if I said to you, actually, they're selling a way for you to be better mums, dads, partners, dog owners. What they're trying to do is just help you feel a bit more comfortable in life. Then you've got people like Intercom. Yes, they've got the chat agents, but actually through Intercom, people are able to enter and export new markets as well, okay? So these brands, they've all got one thing in common, and that's this kind of obsession with understanding what a customer can go on to achieve as a result of using the product, okay? So because of this, they are able to kind of optimize product, marketing, and sales and get them working together, which arguably is kind of that foundation of repeatable growth, which is the thing that gets us closer to product market fit. There we go. I've spoken at you, you've been wonderful, but we've covered what product market fit is. I've told you just how easy it is to achieve it. I've shown you where I went wrong, and I've shown you a couple of things that I wish I knew in hindsight. So many emojis, thank you.
Oh, that was brilliant. Thank you, Lucy. So insightful. Like, I'm going to have to listen to this video again and write down all those little nuggets of information.
Thank you. Sorry, there's a lot to take in. I absolutely appreciate that.
Did anyone have any specific questions they want to ask in person? And we can, or anything in the chat, you can just write it in the chat.